This is Peter Parker, Spider-Man 28 or 26 or 27. I cannot remember, and the text is red on black, so it's hard to see from this distance. But this is the first half of a two-part story that I consider one of my favourite Spider-Man stories, and it is one that I have never seen anyone else ever talk about. This is written by Richard Jenkins, and it is one of the few stories he did which doesn't boil down to Spider-Man remembering how swell his Uncle Ben was. And as long as we are on the topic of things that I never see anyone else ever talk about, the artist for this is Marvin Butchinson, and he had a long run doing the art on this book, and he is really good at drawing Spider-Man. This is Spider-Man to me, very on model, but nobody considers Marvin Butchinson among their top Spider-Man artists. He had a really long stint on this book, and it's not even listed on his Wikipedia page. I was originally going to cover both parts 1 and 2 in a single video, because I was afraid this video would not be very long otherwise. Spider-Man, he is swinging through New York City, and he notices an electrical fire in Times Square, and he begins to investigate. And it's just like the best Spider-Man film, Amazing Spider-Man 2 with Garfield. I say that ironically, knowing that everyone hates it, but it is probably my favourite Spider-Man film on the grounds that I hate them all. There is some electricity nonsense going on, and someone has like overloaded the power grids or something like that. I really wasn't joking when I said there was not much to talk about. But the person responsible is Mental Storm, and he appears on one of them big advertising screens, or rather, a very pixelated icon of his face does. And it asks Spider-Man for assistance in a very basic font. Your question is, who is Mental Storm? Well, over here on this badly laid out page, we get all the backstory. He was an hard baddie who worked under Norman Osborn, and then he became like a robot making crazy scientist, and Spider-Man fought him a few times, and then there was this huge space for a lot more text than there actually is. Then we have one of my Spider-Man pet peeves, and it is mostly Spider-Man when I find this annoying. A writer comes along and decides to add a new character to Spider-Man's backstory. And in this case, it is his high school science teacher who made Peter Parker get so interested in the science. And Peter Parker turns to her for her insight on the whole crazy power overload thing. And this idea, this character, it just doesn't work. Because not only has this teacher, who apparently had an enormous impact on Peter Parker's life, not only has she never been mentioned before, but the idea that he regularly visits her like this is asking us to just accept that for the 40 years before this issue, it has been happening off-panel, and nothing of any consequence ever came from these meetings. But also Spider-Man already had a high school science teacher who turned out to be the baddie, the Jekyll. Then the other thing with these sorts of characters is that, naturally, this teacher never appeared again after this story. There are ongoing issues across New York City with power fluctuations and stuff like that. And Spider-Man gets a hacker to help him find Mental Storm's location. This was 2001. Hacking seemed like it was the way of the future. Also this here, that is his roommate in the Nickelback Spencer run. So Spider-Man, he tracks down Mental Storm, and Christ, this is a short review, isn't it? He has to get past all these defences, and we are meant to think that he has just been attacked by a bad guy, but instead he finds Mental Storm to be naught more than a disembodied head kept alive by a bunch of machines, and he begs Spider-Man to help him. He wants Spider-Man to pull the plug and put him out of his misery. To be continued. And the review is to be continued, really. This is 22 pages of setup for what is a fairly interesting moral debate for Spider-Man. I didn't recommend it as a single issue, but the two-parter I do recommend. It was collected in trade, but the trade is out of print, and I gave my copy of the trade away to Robin, so you best just get the 2 issues. Spider-Man, he was drawn well, so I rate it 7 thumbs up.